Captain Jake Morrison stood at the large window of his ship's bridge, looking out into the cold darkness of space. Where Earth used to shine like a blue jewel, now only pieces of rock and metal floated in the black void. His home planet was gone. Destroyed, turned into nothing but space dust and broken dreams. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of machines keeping them alive. Jake could feel his crew watching him, waiting for orders, waiting for hope. But what hope was there now? Earth was dead. The colonies were dead. Most of humanity was dead. Commander Lisa Rodriguez walked up beside him, her boots making soft sounds on the metal floor. She held a data pad in her hands, but Jake could see she didn't want to give him the numbers written on it. Her dark hair was messy, and her uniform had stains from working non-stop for the past 3 days. "Sir," she said quietly. "The final. Count us in." Jake turned to look at her. Lisa had been with him for 5 years. She was tough, smart, and never backed down from a fight. But now her eyes looked hollow, like someone had taken all the light out of them. "Tell me," Jake said. Lisa looked down at her data pad. 12 billion people lived on Earth and the colonies. 12 billion. Her voice got smaller. "We found 43,000 survivors, that's all. 7 ships made it out." Jake felt something cold move through his chest. 43,000. Out of 12 billion. The numbers didn't make sense in his head. How could so many people just be gone? "The other ships?" he asked. "UES Venture has 8,000 people. UES Guardian has 6,000. The smaller ships have between 2,000 and 5,000 each." Lisa's hand shook a little as she held the data pad. "Captain, we're all that's left of the human race." Jake looked back out the window. Pieces of what used to be the space station orbiting Earth drifted past. He could see part of a sign that once said, "Welcome home," in bright blue letters. Now it just said, "Well," and the rest was burned away. Behind him, the bridge crew worked, at their stations. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh was trying to fix the damaged power systems. Communications Officer Amy Parker was listening for any other human voices in the darkness. Weapons Officer Ryan Carter kept watching the screens for enemy ships. They were good people, the best. But they looked tired and scared. Jake had seen that look before, but never this bad. It was the look of people who had lost everything and didn't know what to do next. "Sir," Amy Parker called from her station. "I'm picking up signals from the Zephyrian fleet. They're still out there, about 2 light years away." Jake nodded. "The Zephyrians. The aliens who did this. They came with their big ships and their weapons and their friends from other worlds. They said humans were dangerous. They said humans had to die, and they made it happen. The Zephyrians weren't alone. They brought 3 other alien races with them. The Nexari, who were smart and liked to make deals. The Keth, who all thought with one big shared mind. And the Vorlak, who were very old and knew many things. Together they decided that humans were too risky to let live." Jake remembered the first day they came. He was on patrol near Mars when the big alien ships appeared. Ships bigger than cities, with weapons that could destroy planets. The human fleet fought back, but it wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. "Captain," Danny Walsh said from his station, "the engines are working, but barely. We can't run much longer on what we have." "Food supplies?" Jake asked. 6 months, maybe 7 if we're careful," Lisa answered. 6 months. Jake looked around the bridge again. His people were trying to stay strong, but he could see the truth in their faces. They were all thinking the same thing. What was the point? Where could they go? What could 43,000 people do against an empire that had ships in every part of the galaxy? Jake turned back to the window. A piece of metal floated by that looked like it came from a house. Maybe someone's kitchen table. Maybe a child's bed. It was hard to tell what anything used to be after the aliens finished with it. He thought about his own house back on Earth. The little blue house with the white fence where he grew up. His mother used to make pancakes on Sunday mornings. His father taught him to fix old cars in the garage. His sister would play her music too loud and make everyone laugh. All gone now. All of it just memories floating in the dark. Something warm touched Jake's cheek. He reached up and felt wetness there. Water was coming from his eyes. He tried to stop it, but more came. The water ran down his face and dropped onto his uniform. The bridge went completely quiet. Everyone stopped what they were doing and looked at their captain. Danny Walsh had never seen Captain Morrison cry. Neither had Amy Parker or Ryan Carter. Lisa Rodriguez had worked with Jake for years, and she had never seen him show anything but strength. But now water was coming from his eyes and he couldn't make it stop. Jake thought about his family, his friends, his planet, his species. All gone. All dead. And for what? Because some aliens decided humans were scary? Sir? Lisa said softly. Jake wiped his face with his hand, but more water came. He looked at his crew, these brave people who were depending on him to lead them. But lead them where? To what? I'm sorry, Jake said. I'm sorry I couldn't save them. I'm sorry I couldn't save any of them. Danny Walsh stood up from his station. The big engineer had tears in his eyes too now. It's not your fault, Captain. None of us could have stopped this. Amy Parker was crying at her station, trying to keep working while water ran down her face. Ryan Carter, the tough weapons officer who never showed feelings, had tears making lines down his cheeks. All around the ship, the same thing was happening. In the engine rooms, people were crying while they worked. In the medical bay, doctors were taking care of hurt people, while tears fell from their eyes. In the crew quarters, families held each other and cried for everything they had lost. On the other ships in their small fleet, the same scene was playing out. Captain Susan Bell of the UES Venture was crying as she read the names of the dead. Dr. Peter Hayes was crying while he tried to help traumatized survivors. Mechanic Carol Smith was crying while she looked at a picture of her children who didn't make it off Earth. The crying wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, like rain falling on leaves. But it was everywhere. Every human who was left alive was letting water fall from their eyes for all the humans who would never cry again. Jake looked out at the darkness where his world used to be. The tears kept coming, and he let them. For his mother's pancakes, for his father's laugh, for his sister's music, for every person who had ever called Earth home, for every child who would never grow up, for every dream that died with their planet. What Jake didn't know was that alien eyes were watching, far away, on ships with strange shapes and weapons that could crack moons in half. Creatures with different faces and different minds were looking at the humans through cameras and sensors, and they were very confused by what they saw, water coming from human eyes. What did it mean? Was it some kind of weapon? Some kind of sickness? Some kind of message? The aliens had never seen anything like it before, and they had no idea that those tears would be the last warning they would ever get. Admiral Kreck stood in the command center of his massive warship, the Dominator. The ship was so big that entire cities could fit inside it. Its weapons could turn planets into dust, and its shields could stop almost any attack. Krex had used this ship to destroy hundreds of worlds and countless species. But today, something strange was bothering him. The Admiral was tall and covered in thick gray skin that looked like armor. His forearms moved quickly as he worked at different control panels. His red eyes could see many different types of light that humans couldn't even imagine. Krex had lived for 300 years and had never lost a battle. "Admiral," said Lieutenant Vex, approaching with a data crystal in his clawed hand. "The scout reports are ready." Krex took the crystal and placed it into his command station. Images filled the air around him, showing the inside of human ships. The images came from tiny spy devices that the Zephyrians had sent to watch the human survivors. What Krex saw made no sense to him. The images showed humans with water coming from their eyes. Clear liquid was running down their faces and falling onto the floors of their ships. Some humans were making strange sounds while the water came out. Others were silent, but the water kept flowing. "What is this?" Krex asked, pointing at the images with one of his forearms. Lieutenant Vex looked confused too. "We don't know, sir. The water appears to be coming from their optical organs. We've never seen anything like it." Krex watched as the images showed more humans doing the same thing. A human female holding a small human child, both with water streaming from their eyes. A human male in an engine room, water falling as he worked on broken machines. an older human female looking at small pictures, water dropping onto the images. "Are they dying?" Krex asked. "Unknown, sir. They continue to work and move normally, but this liquid discharge is happening everywhere on their ships." Krex had destroyed many species in his long career. He had seen them fight back with weapons, try to run away in their ships, or surrender and beg for mercy, but he had never seen anything like this water coming from their eyes. On another part of the Dominator, Trademaster Zolt was studying the same images. Zolt was a Nexari, a species that looked like large insects with 6 legs and 2 arms. The Nexari were very smart and loved to make deals and trades. They joined the Alliance because they wanted to take over human trade routes and planets. Zolt's compound eyes could see thousands of tiny images at once. He was looking at the human ships from every angle, trying to understand what the water meant. "Computer," Zolt said in his clicking voice. "Analyze human liquid discharge. Compare with known biological functions," the computer's voice answered. "Analysis complete. Liquid appears to be mostly water with small amounts of salt and other chemicals. Purpose unknown. No similar function exists in Nexari, Zephyrian, Keth, or Vorlak biology." Zolt clicked his mandibles together, which was how Nexari showed they were thinking hard. The water made no sense. Why would a species waste precious water by letting it leak from their bodies? Water was valuable. Smart species kept all their water inside where it belonged. Could it be a weapon? Zolt wondered aloud. Negative. Liquid shows no toxic or harmful properties. Chemical composition suggests normal bodily fluid. Zolt watched the images again. The humans were clearly in distress, but they weren't fighting or trying to escape. They were just sitting or standing there, letting water fall from their eyes. It was the strangest thing he had ever seen. Far away on a Keth collective ship, thousands of minds were thinking about the same problem. The Keth were not like other species. They didn't have individual thoughts. Instead, all Keth shared one big mind that connected them all together. When one Keth learned something, they all knew it instantly. Node Prime 7 Alpha was the part of the collective mind that was studying the humans. Through the shared consciousness, all Keth were watching. The strange water phenomenon. The collective mind analyzed the data in ways that individual minds couldn't. They looked at patterns, timing, and connections that others might miss. But even with their combined intelligence, they couldn't understand what they were seeing. One part of the collective suggested the water might be a cooling system. Another part thought it could be a way to clean their optical organs. A third part wondered if the humans were somehow communicating with each other through the water. But none of these ideas felt right. The collective mind kept studying, kept analyzing, but the answer stayed hidden. On the Vorlak science vessel, ancient sage Threnax was also puzzled. The Vorlak were the oldest species in the galaxy. They had existed for millions of years and had seen almost everything. Threnax himself was over 10,000 years old and had studied hundreds of different species. The Vorlak looked like tall, thin beings made of what seemed like living crystal. They glowed with soft light and could think faster than any computer. Threnax had helped plan the attack on humanity because his calculations showed that humans would become too dangerous if left alone. But now, looking at the images of crying humans, Threnax felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: uncertainty. "This does not match any known biological response," Threnax said to his assistants, his voice sounding like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The humans continue to function normally while losing bodily fluids. There is no logical reason for this behavior." Young sage Quileth, who was only 2,000 years old, offered a suggestion. "Perhaps it is a malfunction caused by the stress of their situation?" Threnax considered this. Possible, but unlikely. The water discharge appears controlled, not random. And it is happening to all humans simultaneously across all their ships. The old Vorlak sage had seen species react to extinction in many ways. Some fought until the last individual died. Others gave up and waited for death peacefully. A few tried to bargain or surrender. But this water from eyes response was completely new. Back on the Dominator, Admiral Krex was meeting with the other Alliance leaders through quantum communication. Their images appeared as holograms in his command center. The humans are exhibiting unknown behavior, Krex reported. Water is leaking from their optical organs. We need to determine if this represents a threat. Trademaster Zolt's insect-like image clicked its mandibles. My analysis suggests biological malfunction. Perhaps they are dying naturally, saving us the effort of finishing them. The Keth Collective spoke through Node Prime 7 Alpha. Collective analysis indicates possible communication method. Water patterns may contain coded information. Ancient Sage Thrinex's crystal form glowed brighter as he spoke. My calculations suggest neither malfunction nor communication. This appears to be an emotional response, but unlike any we have cataloged. Emotional? Krex asked. He knew about emotions from studying other species, but they were usually simple things. Fear made creatures run away. Anger made them fight. Joy made them celebrate. But what emotion would make water come from eyes? The timing corresponds with their discovery of casualty reports, Thrinex explained. The water began flowing when they learned the extent of their losses. Krex thought about this. In Zephyrian culture, loss meant opportunity. When enemies died, it meant more resources and territory for the survivors. When Zephyrians lost battles, the survivors became stronger by learning from the defeat. There was no wasted water involved. So they leak water when they lose things? Krex asked. It appears so, Thranex confirmed. How inefficient, Trademaster Zolt clicked. Wasting precious bodily fluids serves no purpose. Node Prime 7 Alpha spoke. For the collective, Keth analysis confirms inefficiency. Water should be retained for survival functions. Admiral Krex looked at the images again. The humans were still leaking water, but they were also still working, still trying to repair their ships, still taking care of their injured, still functioning as a species. Just with water running down their faces. Continue monitoring, Krex ordered. If this is how humans respond to loss, they will likely leak themselves to death within days. We can wait and let nature finish what we started. The other Alliance leaders agreed. Why waste weapons and fuel on humans who were apparently killing themselves with their own strange biology? They would watch and wait. Soon, the last humans would be gone, and the galaxy would be safe from their dangerous potential. But none of the alien leaders understood what they were really seeing. They thought that tears meant weakness, defeat, or biological failure. They had no idea that tears meant something completely different. They had no idea that they were watching the calm before the storm. 5 days had passed since the aliens first saw humans crying. The 7 human ships drifted slowly through space like lost children, their engines barely working, their lights dim. To anyone watching from far away, they looked like a beaten enemy waiting to die. Admiral Krex stood on his bridge looking at the reports from his scouts. The humans were still alive, but they were doing strange things. They kept having gatherings where many humans would sit together, and more water would come from their eyes. Sometimes they would hold small objects and the water would flow faster. Other times they would look at pictures or play sounds and the water would start again. Sir, Lieutenant Vex said, approaching with new data. The humans are showing signs of complete psychological breakdown. The water discharge continues, and they appear to be entering a state of permanent mourning. Krex nodded. Mourning was something he understood a little. When Zephyrians lost important battles, they would spend one day remembering the dead, then move on to planning revenge. But humans had been mourning for 5 days straight. It seemed like they couldn't stop. How long can a species survive in this condition? Krex asked. Unknown, sir. But our analysts believe they will either die from the fluid loss or simply give up completely within another week. This was good news for Krex. He had been worried about having to chase down the human survivors across the galaxy. Humans were known for being stubborn and hard to kill completely. But if they were going to destroy themselves with their own strange mourning process, it would save a lot of time and ammunition. On the Nexari trade ship, Zolt was watching the economic implications of the human collapse. The Nexari had already started planning how to divide up human territories and trade routes. With the humans gone, There would be valuable planets and asteroid fields free for the taking. The human ships are broadcasting continuously, reported Zolt's assistant, a younger Nexari named Quib. They appear to be sharing personal information between vessels. Zolt's compound eyes focused on the data streams. The humans were indeed sending massive amounts of information back and forth between their ships. Personal records, family histories, technical knowledge, cultural data. It looked like they were trying to preserve everything about their species before they died. How sentimental, Zolt clicked. They're creating a digital grave for their entire civilization. This made sense to Zolt. The Nexari were practical beings who understood the value of information. If the humans knew they were going to die, it was logical to try to save their knowledge somehow. Maybe other species would find it interesting thousands of years from now. Should we interfere with their transmissions? Quib asked. No, Zolti decided. Let them have their final digital farewell. It changes nothing. On the Keith Collective ship, thousands of minds were analyzing the human behavior patterns. The collective had decided that the humans were experiencing what individual-minded species called grief, but the Keth couldn't really understand it. When Keth died, their thoughts simply rejoined the collective consciousness. Death was just a change of form, not a real loss. The idea that humans could be so affected by death that they would leak water for days was completely alien to the Keth way of thinking. Node Prime 7 Alpha processed the data streams between human ships. The collective could see that humans were sharing memories, skills, and knowledge at an incredible rate. It was almost like they were trying to create their own version of a collective consciousness before they died. Interesting adaptation, the collective thought as one. They are attempting to preserve their individual experiences through digital sharing. Inefficient but understandable for a species that lacks proper collective thinking. The Keth decided to study this human death process more carefully. It might provide useful data about how individual-minded species handled extinction. Ancient sage Thranex was having different thoughts aboard the Vorlak science vessel. His 10,000 years of experience made him more cautious than the other Alliance leaders. He had seen too many defeated species surprise their conquerors to be completely comfortable with the current situation. The humans continued to maintain their ships, Thranex observed to his assistants. Their weapon systems remain online. Their engines function adequately. For a species supposedly dying of grief, they show remarkable maintenance discipline. Young Sage Quileth looked at the perhaps it is simple habit, Ancient One. Some species continue routine behaviors even when facing extinction. Perhaps, Thranex agreed. But something felt wrong to him. His calculations had predicted that humans would either fight desperately or surrender quickly. This slow, tearful decline seemed too convenient. Meanwhile, on the human ships, a very different story was unfolding. Captain Jake Morrison sat in his quarters aboard the UES Defiance, looking at his personal communication screen. On the screen was Dr. Peter Hayes from the UES Venture, Captain Susan Bell from the UES Guardian, and the captains of the other 4 ships. They had been meeting like this every day since the crying started. The alien surveillance is exactly what we expected, Dr. Hayes reported. His voice was calm, but Jake could see that his eyes were still red from crying. They're watching us, but they think we're falling apart. Captain Susan Bell nodded. My people have been monitoring their communications. The aliens are convinced we're having some kind of psychological breakdown. They think the crying means we're giving up. Jake almost smiled, but then he remembered why they were really crying, and the sadness came back. Good. Let them think that. How's the real work? Progressing. Better than we hoped, said Captain Frank Torres from the UES Liberty. My engineer teams have been sharing technical data with all the other ships. We're learning things we never knew about each other's systems. This was the truth the aliens couldn't see. While humans were crying and sharing memories, they were also sharing everything else. Every technical manual, every weapons schematic, every tactical plan, every scientific discovery. The 7 ships were becoming more connected than they had ever been. Dr. Hayes continued his report. The psychological profiles are incredible, Jake. We're mapping every person's skills, knowledge, and experience. We know more about our own people now than we ever did when we had billions of humans to work with. On each ship, similar scenes were playing out. In the engine rooms, human engineers were crying while they worked, but they were also learning new techniques from engineers. On other ships, in the weapon bays, human soldiers were crying while they cleaned their guns, but they were also sharing tactical knowledge that had never been written down before. Mechanic Carol Smith was in the workshop of the UES Venture, tears still falling, as she looked at pictures of her dead children. But her hands were busy building new tools, better tools, tools designed using techniques shared from mechanics on 6 other ships. Every tear that fell was for her lost family, but every bolt she turned was for the family she still had left. Communications Officer Amy Parker was crying at her station on the UES Defiance, but she was also listening to alien communications, with skills she had learned from communications officers on other ships. She was hearing things in the alien signals that no single human would have been able to detect alone. The crying wasn't stopping the work. If anything, it was making the work more focused, more intense. Every human knew exactly why they were working now. They were working for everyone they had lost. They were working for everyone they might still save. They were working for revenge. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh had stopped trying to hide his tears. He cried while he redesigned the ship's power systems using ideas from engineers on other ships. He cried while he built new weapons using materials he never would have thought to combine before. He cried while he turned the UES Defiance into something it had never been meant to be. The aliens thought human tears meant the end. They thought crying meant giving up, falling apart, becoming weak. They had no idea that human tears meant the exact opposite. They had no idea that when humans cried together, they became stronger than they had ever been alone. They had no idea that the quiet crying humans they were watching were becoming something new, something dangerous, something that would make them wish they had never heard of the word human. The storm was coming, and the aliens were too busy watching the tears to see the lightning building in the clouds. On the 10th day after Earth died, Captain Jake Morrison called together all the surviving humans for the first time. Every person on every ship stopped what they were doing and gathered around their communication screens. Children sat with adults. Engineers stood next to doctors. Soldiers listened alongside civilians. For the first time since the crying began, Jake was not alone on his bridge. The main screen on the UES Defiance showed faces from all 7 ships. 43,000 faces, looking back at him through cameras and screens. Some were still crying. Others had red, swollen eyes from days of tears. But all of them were listening. Jake looked out at his people and felt something change inside his chest. The sadness was still there. The pain of losing Earth would never go away. But now there was something else growing alongside the grief. Something harder. Something angry. "My friends," Jake began, his voice carrying to every ship in their small fleet, "we have been crying for 10 days. We have cried for our families, our friends, our world, our future. We have cried for everything we lost and everything we will never have again." Around the fleet, people nodded. They knew exactly what Jake meant. Everyone had their own reasons for the tears that kept falling. "But I want to tell you something that our enemies don't understand," Jake continued. "They think our tears make us weak. They think crying means we have given up. They are wrong." Dr. Peter Hayes stepped forward on the UES Venture. He had been studying human psychology since the crying began, and what he had learned surprised even him. "Captain Morrison is right," Dr. Hayes said, his voice reaching all the ships. "The aliens don't understand what tears really mean for humans. They see water falling from our eyes and think it means we are broken. But tears don't mean we are broken. Tears mean we remember. Tears mean we care. Tears mean we love." On the UES Guardian, Captain Susan Bell was nodding. "Every tear we have shed has been for someone or something that mattered to us. Our tears are not weakness. Our tears are proof of the connections that make us human." Jake felt the truth of those words in his bones. He had cried for his mother's pancakes, but that meant he remembered the love she put into making them. He had cried for his father's laugh, but that meant he still carried that joy inside him. He had cried for his sister's music, but that meant the beauty she created would never truly die. Chief Weapons Officer Ryan Carter spoke up from his station. "Sir, I've been thinking about something. The aliens destroyed our bodies, but they can't destroy our memories. They can't destroy what we mean to each other." "That's right," Jake said. "And that's why these past 10 days have been the most important days in human history." Around the fleet, people looked confused. Important? They had been drifting through space, crying and remembering the dead. How could that be important? Jake smiled for the first time since Earth died. While we were crying, we were also doing something else. Something the aliens missed because they don't understand tears. We were sharing. We were connecting. We were becoming something new. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh stepped forward. "Captain's right. While I was crying for my family, I was also learning from engineers on 6 other ships. I know things now that no single human engineer has ever known before." Communications Officer Amy Parker nodded from her station. "I've been listening to alien communications while I cried, but I'm not just using my own skills anymore. I'm using techniques shared from communications officers across our entire fleet. I can hear things in their signals that none of us could have heard alone." All around the fleet, similar realizations were dawning. Mechanic Carol Smith had been crying while building tools, but the tools she built used knowledge from mechanics on every ship. Dr. Hayes had been treating trauma patients while tears fell down his face, but he was using medical techniques shared from doctors throughout the fleet. "The aliens think 43,000 humans are weaker than 12 billion humans," Jake continued. "But they're wrong. These 43,000 humans know more about each other, trust each other more, and are more connected than 12 billion humans ever were." It was true. On Earth and the colonies, humans had been scattered across thousands of worlds. Most humans never met most other humans. They lived in their own cities, worked their own jobs, knew their own small groups of people. But now every surviving human knew every other surviving human. They had shared their memories, their skills, their knowledge, their pain. The crying had not just been mourning, the crying had been bonding. "We are not the same species that lived on Earth," Jake said. "We are something new. We are humanity, distilled down to its purest form. We are what humans become when everything else is taken away except the connections between us." Dr. Hayes had been documenting this transformation. "The psychological changes are remarkable," he reported. "We have achieved a level of unity and shared purpose that our species has never experienced before. We know each other completely now. We trust each other absolutely." This was the truth the aliens had missed. While they watched humans cry and assumed it meant weakness, the humans had been forging bonds stronger than steel. Every shared memory, every exchanged skill, every moment of comfort given to another crying person had made the connections deeper. Katie Johnson, a civilian who had escaped from Earth with her injured child, stood up to speak. The aliens had seen her crying while holding her daughter and assumed she was just a helpless victim. They had no idea who she really was. "My name is Katie Johnson," she said to the assembled fleet. "Before the war, I was Colonel Katherine Johnson, Strategic Planning Division, Earth Defense Force. I've been working with our ship captains to develop new tactical approaches." Around the fleet, people were revealing themselves. The mechanic who the aliens thought was just a simple worker had actually designed weapon systems. The doctor who seemed like a harmless healer had been a military strategist. The quiet engineer had been a theoretical physicist. But more than that, they were all sharing what they knew. The weapon designer was teaching the healer. The strategist was learning from the physicist. The engineer was working with the mechanic. They were becoming a collective intelligence that was greater than the sum of its parts. "The aliens made a mistake," Jake continued. "They saw us as individuals, 12 billion separate people who could be killed separately. But we were never just individuals. We were always connected by invisible threads of love, memory, shared experience, and hope." Chief Engineer Danny Walsh held up a device he had been working on. "This is a quantum communication link. It uses technology shared from all 7 ships, combined in ways that none of us could have imagined alone. While we were crying, we were building things that have never existed before." The device looked simple, but it represented something revolutionary. It was created not by one human mind, but by the collective knowledge of 43,000 human minds working together. "We have become something the aliens cannot understand," Jake said. "They see us as broken survivors. But we are not broken. We are refined. We are purified. We are concentrated into something stronger than we ever were before." Amy Parker looked up from her communication station. "Captain, I'm detecting increased alien patrol activity. I think they're getting ready to finish us off." Jake nodded. He had expected this. The aliens had been patient, waiting for the humans to die of grief. But patience had limits, and the aliens would eventually come to collect the last human survivors. "Good," Jake said, and his voice had something in it that had not been there 10 days ago. Something cold and hard and absolutely certain. "Let them come." Around the fleet, the crying was beginning to slow down. Not because the sadness was going away, but because something else was taking its place. The grief was transforming into something the aliens had never seen before and would never understand until it was too late. The tears had done their work. The connections were made. The transformation was complete. Now it was time to show the galaxy what humans became when they stopped crying. The human fleet emerged from the asteroid field like ghosts rising from their graves. But these were not the same broken ships that had limped away from Earth's funeral pyre 2 weeks ago. The 7 vessels moved together with perfect coordination, their hulls gleaming with new armor plating that Danny Walsh and his engineering teams had built from asteroid metal and pure determination. Admiral Krex was drinking his morning nutrition fluid when the alarm started screaming on the Dominator. He rushed to his command center, expecting to see the human ships finally dying or surrendering. Instead, his screen showed something impossible. "Report," Krex demanded, his forearms working frantically at his control stations. "Sir, the human ships have emerged from the asteroid field," Lieutenant Vex said, his voice shaking. "But they're different. The energy signatures don't match our previous readings." Krex looked at the tactical display. The human ships were approaching, in a formation he had never seen before. They moved like parts of a single organism, perfectly synchronized, perfectly coordinated. Their weapons were powered up, and their shields were stronger than anything the humans had possessed before. "How many ships?" Krex asked. "7 ships, sir, but they're acting like one ship with 7 parts." This made no sense. Krex had been watching these humans for 2 weeks. They had been crying, mourning, falling apart. How could broken ships suddenly become so coordinated? On the UES Defiance, Captain Jake Morrison stood on his bridge, but he was no longer alone. Holographic images of the other 6 ship captains stood beside him, making it look like all 7 captains were commanding from the same bridge. Through quantum communication links that Danny Walsh had perfected, all 7 ships were truly functioning as one. "Open a channel to all alien vessels," Jake ordered. Amy Parker, whose communication skills now included techniques from 6 other communications officers, easily broke through the alien encryption. Her voice, backed by the voices of communications officers from all 7 ships, reached every alien vessel in the area. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human fleet," Jake said, his voice carrying across space to reach alien ears that had never heard a human speak with such cold certainty. "You wanted to see what happens when humans cry. Now you will learn what happens when we stop." Admiral Krex felt something he had not experienced in 300 years of warfare. Fear. There was something in the human captain's voice that made his armored skin crawl. Something that told him he had made a terrible mistake. "All ships, attack formation," Krex ordered. "Destroy the human vessels immediately." The Zephyrian fleet moved to attack, but the humans were ready. As the alien ships approached, the human fleet did something that should have been impossible. They shared their shields. Danny Walsh had used the shared knowledge of all 7 engineering teams to create a shield network that connected all the human ships. When the alien weapons hit the UES Defiance, the energy was instantly distributed among all 7 ships. The attack that should have destroyed 1 ship was absorbed by 7. But the humans did more than just defend. They attacked with a coordination that the aliens had never seen before. Each human ship knew exactly where every other human ship was, exactly what every other ship was doing, exactly what every other ship needed. The UES Venture fired at a Zephyrian cruiser, while the UES Guardian provided covering fire, and the UES Liberty targeted the cruiser's engines. All three attacks hit at exactly the same moment, destroying the alien ship instantly. Trademaster Zolt watched from his Nexari vessel as the humans tore through the Zephyrian attack formation. This was not how defeated species were supposed to behave. The humans were fighting like they had nothing to lose and everything to gain. How are they coordinating so precisely? Zolt clicked to his assistants. Unknown, Trademaster. Their communication patterns are unlike anything we have seen. They appear to be sharing real-time tactical data across all vessels simultaneously. On the Keth collective ship, thousands of minds were trying to understand what they were seeing. The humans were fighting like a collective, but they were still individuals. It was as if they had taken the best parts of collective thinking while keeping their individual creativity and unpredictability. This should not be possible, the collective thought as one. Individual minds cannot achieve this level of coordination without losing their individuality, but the humans were proving them wrong. Dr. Peter Hayes was coordinating medical support across all 7 ships, while simultaneously helping with tactical planning. Katie Johnson was running strategic analysis, while also comforting frightened children. Every human was doing multiple jobs, supporting multiple ships, being part of multiple teams all at once. The battle became more intense. Chief Weapons Officer Ryan Carter, now connected to weapons officers on 6 other ships, was targeting alien vessels with precision that no single human could have achieved. His weapons fired in perfect coordination with weapons from other ships, creating devastating crossfire patterns that the aliens could not escape. Amy Parker was doing something that should have been impossible. She was listening to alien communications from all their ships simultaneously, predicting their moves, and sharing that information instantly with all human vessels. The humans knew what the aliens were going to do before the aliens did it. Ancient. Sage Threnex watched the battle from his Vorlac science vessel, his crystal form glowing brighter with confusion and fear. In 10,000 years of life, he had never seen anything like this. The humans were fighting with the collective intelligence of a hive mind, but with the creativity and unpredictability of individuals. Retreat, Threnex commanded. Signal all ships to retreat immediately. But it was too late. The humans had anticipated this as well. Chief Engineer Danny Walsh had been working on something special while the crying was happening. Something that Katie Johnson had helped him design using strategic knowledge shared across all ships. Something that Dr. Hayes had helped perfect using medical knowledge of alien biology. As the alien ships tried to escape, the human fleet released clouds of microscopic robots that Danny had built. The robots were too small for alien sensors to detect, but they carried a very special payload. They carried the sound of human crying. But this was not just any recording. Dr. Hayes had discovered something while studying the psychological effects of human tears. The sound of human crying contained frequencies that could affect alien nervous systems in unexpected ways. When amplified and modified using techniques shared across all 7 ships, it became a weapon. The Nexari ships were hit. First, the modified sound of human tears caused their insect-like nervous systems to overload. Zolt and his crew abandoned their ships in confusion, their compound eyes unable to focus, their minds unable to think clearly. The Keth collective ships were next. The crying sounds disrupted their shared consciousness, causing thousands of minds to disconnect from each other. For the first time in their species' history, Keth individuals found themselves alone in their own heads, terrified and unable to function. The Vorlac ships tried to shield themselves, but the sound penetrated their crystal bodies and caused their light-based communications to flicker and fail. Ancient Sage Threnex, who had lived for 10,000 years, found himself unable to think as the sound of human grief filled his ancient mind. Only the Zephyrian ships remained functional, but they were alone now. Admiral Krex looked around at the chaos and realized that his mighty alliance had been destroyed by the sound of human tears. Impossible, Krex whispered as the human fleet approached his flagship. Captain Jake Morrison's face appeared on Krex's main screen. The human captain was no longer crying. His eyes were dry, but they burned with something far more dangerous than tears. You asked what the water from our eyes meant, Jake said. Let me explain. When humans cry, we are saying goodbye to who we used to be. When we stop crying, we have become something else entirely. The UES Defiance moved alongside the Dominator. Through the viewports, Krex could see humans working together with perfect coordination, their faces calm and determined. Your mistake was thinking that tears meant weakness, Jake continued. But human tears are not weakness. They are transformation. They are the price we pay to become something stronger. Admiral Krex watched as his ship's systems began shutting down, disabled by the microscopic robots that were still playing the sound of human grief. His 300-year career of conquest was ending because he had not understood the meaning of tears. We are the 43,000, Jake said as Krex's ship went dark around him. We are what remains when everything else is taken away. We are what humans become when we have nothing left to lose and everything left to fight for. The battle was over. The alien alliance was broken. Their ships drifted powerless in space, their crews overwhelmed by the sound of human sorrow turned into human vengeance. In the days that followed, the few surviving alien ships fled deep into space, carrying warnings about the humans. But the warnings all said the same thing. When you see a human cry, you are not seeing weakness. You are seeing the last warning you will ever get. The 43,000 survivors had learned the most important lesson of their species. Human tears were not the end of the story.